I'm glad you're here. You've just stepped into halfway between zero, where ordinary places hide impossible secrets, and curiosity can get you trapped. Watch closely. I promise you'll notice things no one else sees. Don't blink. Stick around. You might not want to look away. The shadow in my hallway. I first noticed it in the corner of my hallway. Just a flicker, impossible to define, like a darkness that moved against the light. It wasn't there when I turned to face it, but I felt its weight, patient, waiting, stretching toward me in silence. Each night, the shadow grew, stretching farther along the walls, its edges impossible to trace, flickering just beyond perception. I started leaving the hall light on, but the darkness pooled in corners, tinging illumination, refusing to reveal itself fully. When I walked past, it seemed to tilt, following my gait, timing my steps with precision I couldn't explain. I tried confronting it, shouting, stomping, but the air felt colder, heavier, as if the shadow ignored my presence entirely. Mirrors reflected parts of it, fragments along the floor, angles that shouldn't exist. The darkness, always there, watching, calculating. I began to dread entering my own hallway, slowing my steps, hesitating at doorways, fearing the moment the shadow would move toward me. Sometimes I woke to soft whispers echoing from the hall, a voice like mine but slower, stretched, drawing my name from the shadows. I taped the hallway corners, hoping to capture it on camera, but playback showed only empty floors. The darkness erased, leaving silence. Even in daylight, the shadow lingered, stretching along baseboards and molding. Impossible to ignore, subtle, patient, aware of every motion. I started leaving objects in the hallway, shoes, boxes, bags, and found them slightly shifted each morning, rearranged like a silent game. The air grew thick at night, scentless but suffocating, like it occupied space that shouldn't exist, a body without shape. I woke once to a cold brush against my arm, soft, deliberate, and the shadows seemed thicker, deeper, heavier than ever before. I tried ignoring it, moving past, walking quickly, but the whispers followed, low, indistinct, pressing against my thoughts with subtle malice. Even my bedroom door seemed to bend the shadows toward itself, pooling darkness under the frame, stretching toward my bed when I slept. I began leaving lights on in every room, but the shadow adapted, slipping between illumination, always patient, always waiting, never leaving. The hallway seemed longer each night, corners shifting, angles impossible, a labyrinth that rearranged itself while I was awake. I stopped inviting friends over, afraid they might see what I could only feel, a presence bending reality in a way no one could explain. I started whispering back into the darkness, testing it, speaking nonsense, and the shadows would pulse in response, timing themselves with my words. Every reflective surface showed fragments, glimpses of black, edges that shouldn't exist, fingers of shadow curling just beyond recognition. I tried to run one night, sprinting down the hall, but the shadows stretched faster, angles twisting, K-doors misaligning, my escape impossible. Even when I left my apartment, the hallway lingered in my mind, every step outside accompanied by the feeling of stretching darkness behind me. I began sleeping with my back to the door, eyes wide, fearing the moment it would reach out, touch, occupy the space I needed to exist. The whispers grew clearer, forming words I could parse, sentences that promised knowledge and pain, hints of presence behind every wall in the apartment. I tried covering corners, blocking edges with furniture, but the shadow flowed around them. Patient, intelligent, aware of every barrier I erected. Each night, I dreamt it closer, longer, darker, crawling across the walls, pulling the air toward it, dragging me into impossible angles. Even now, I feel it in every hallway, baseboard, and doorway I pass. Patient, watching, waiting for the moment I glance too long. I understand it will never leave, that it exists where I exist, stretching, bending, waiting, perfectly aligned with every step I take. I've learned to walk lightly, never glance into corners, keep the lights on. But I know the shadow has already claimed the hallway as its own, and when I close my eyes at night, I feel it there, patient, waiting, stretching across the walls, whispering my name, inevitable, eternal. The stranger in my ceiling started with small noises above my bedroom, faint tapping, like footsteps on the floorboards of a space that shouldn't exist. Told myself it was the building settling, a neighbor moving late at night. Nothing unusual, nothing to worry about. The tapping grew precise, deliberate, following a rhythm that matched my heartbeat when I lay awake in bed. One night, I heard a whisper through the ceiling vent, low, almost indistinguishable, calling my name with familiarity I couldn't place. I climbed onto a chair to look into the attic hatch, expecting empty space, but the darkness seemed to stare back. I left the hatch closed, but the noises continued. Tiny thuds, soft scratches, like someone pacing just above my head. The footsteps began to anticipate my movements, starting when I moved, slowing when I paused, a presence learning my patterns. I woke one morning to find my ceiling light slightly tilted, a small scratch around the fixture I hadn't noticed before. Every night, I slept with my pillow over my head, hoping the muffled sounds would fade. But they grew louder, sharper, more deliberate. I tried ignoring them, pretending the sounds were nothing, but the whispers began forming words I could almost understand. Furniture shifted subtly in the room as if it had been touched while I slept, placed in positions I had never chosen. I put cameras in the corners, hoping to catch movement, only to find empty footage. No one there, yet the noises continued. I started taping cardboard over the vent, but the tapping and scratching persisted, sharper, closer, more invasive than ever. The attic hatch became a source of dread. I imagined eyes, a shadow, a face, watching me from above, patient, waiting. One night, I dreamt of someone climbing down through the vent, whispering my thoughts, smiling faintly at each one. I woke to a thud above my head, the vent rattling, as if it had been disturbed by a hand I couldn't see. Sping. I began checking the ceiling at odd hours, flashlight in hand, but the darkness remained perfect, silent, mocking my attempts to see. Even when I left the room, the tapping followed me, creeping along the ceiling above, a constant reminder of presence overhead. I began leaving objects on my bed, then waking to find them subtly moved, edges aligned with angles only someone above could reach. The whispers became warnings. Move, hide, stay awake, do not sleep. Instructions I could not ignore, threats I could not place. I imagined someone peering through the hatch at night, patient, aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every movement. The building felt smaller at night, floors stretching, walls bending, my bedroom shrinking under the weight of the presence above. I stopped sleeping under the center of the ceiling, hugging corners, but the sounds adapted, following my new position precisely. One night, a soft scratch, followed by a whisper, told me to look up, and I felt a cold, deliberate pressure against my chest. I woke to find the vent slightly ajar, corners bent, a shadow curling just inside. No face, no figure, only suggestion. Even my dreams carried it, climbing, pacing, watching, whispering, a presence above me that mirrored my every fear. I stopped inviting anyone in, fearing discovery, fearing what it had learned from my movements and routines. I began counting heartbeats at night, timing breaths, trying to anticipate its patterns, but it always stayed a fraction ahead, patient. The tapping now accompanies me during the day, soft enough to question, persistent enough to terrify, a memory that never leaves. I realize now it doesn't need to descend to terrify me. Its presence alone reshapes the room, the ceiling, the apartment itself. I have learned to live under it, patient, quiet, careful, knowing the moment I ignore the sound, it will move closer, watching, waiting, and I understand finally that my ceiling is no longer empty. Someone or something lives above me, patient, eternal, observing every moment. The room that wasn't mine. I woke to find the bedroom door closed, though I was certain I had left it open when I slept. The furniture looked slightly different, the dresser taller, the bed angled wrong, subtle changes I almost ignored. At first, I blamed exhaustion, jet lag, or moving into a new apartment, but the feeling of wrongness persisted. The room seemed to breathe when I wasn't looking, walls expanding and contracting like lungs, corners shifting subtly. I left the lights on, hoping visibility would prevent the changes, but shadows gathered in impossible angles, ignoring the illumination. Every morning, items were slightly misplaced, clothes folded differently, books rotated, small scratches along the desk I hadn't made. I began to doubt my memory. What I knew as truth no longer matched what I saw in the room. One night, I woke to the faintest scraping sound from the corner, like someone dragging a chair I didn't own. The air felt heavy, tense, as though the room itself were aware of my presence, learning my habits while I slept. I tried leaving notes about where I placed objects, only to find them moved. Corners folded, handwriting altered, mocking my attempts at control. Even my reflection in the mirror looked subtly different, eyes too dark, grin slightly wider, posture unfamiliar yet mine. I started taking measurements, photographing angles, documenting corners, but each day the room contradicted its own layout. Sometimes I woke to find doors I remembered closing wide open, and closets shifted in ways that made no architectural sense. I felt watched, not by a person, but by the space itself, patient, deliberate, tracking my smallest movements. The ceiling fan tilted slightly every morning, shadows moving differently, angles bending subtly, a tease, as though the room were alive. I began to dream the room expanded at night, stretching into impossible dimensions. Doors leading to nowhere, corners folding in on themselves. Even my bed felt off, the mattress higher on one side, blankets arranged in patterns I hadn't made. I stopped trusting my senses, questioning reality, every angle, every corner, every shadow suspicious of intent. Sometimes, I swore the room whispered when I was awake, soft tones, unintelligible but purposeful, echoing off walls that shouldn't exist. I tried leaving for hours, returning to find the room subtly different, arranged as if to mock my absence, alive in my absence. I began covering mirrors, taping measurements, stacking books along edges, but the room adapted. Angles shifting, shadows curling around my defenses. The wallpaper seemed to warp at the edges, patterns twisting imperceptibly, almost forming shapes, almost forming faces, always just beyond clarity. I realized the room knew my routines, anticipated my movements, adjusted its layout, corners, and shadows to stay a fraction ahead. Even the air felt different, denser, thicker, as if every breath was monitored, measured, manipulated by the room itself. I stopped sleeping in the center, hugging corners, yet the room stretched toward me. Shadows pooling, breathing with me, patient and alive. I tried recording it, video and audio, but the footage showed an ordinary room, the distortions invisible, my fear the only evidence. The sense of being observed grew, a constant pressure behind every glance, every movement, the room knowing my thoughts before I acted. I began leaving small markers, sticky notes, tape, objects, yet each morning found them subtly altered, the room claiming authority. Even when I left, the room lingered in my mind, every memory of it warped, angles bending, corners stretching, shadows never gone. Learned to live cautiously, walking lightly, avoiding direct glances, quaking lights on, but I know it waits, patient, aware, eternal. And I understand finally that this room is no longer mine. It exists beyond me, beyond recognition, stretching, watching. It's impossible to escape. The man who lived in my closet started with small sounds at night, rustling clothes, soft, shifting, the faintest creak of floorboards inside my closet. I told myself it was nothing. Pets, the building, settling, a dream, anything but reality. The noises grew precise, deliberate, tracking my movements, shifting closer when I approached, receding when I stepped away. One night, I woke to the door slightly ajar, despite locking it before bed, a shadow curling at the edge. I began checking the closet before sleep, flashlight in hand, finding only darkness, emptiness, the air thick with quiet menace. The presence seemed aware, patient, waiting, adapting to my habits, my schedules, learning my routines without moving a muscle. I set up cameras, hoping for footage, but playback showed empty space, yet my senses screamed otherwise. His clothes shifted subtly, hangers tilting, drawers opened slightly. Edges of shoes nudged, all impossible without deliberate intervention. I started leaving traps, boxes, small noise-making devices, yet each morning they were subtly displaced. The sense of being watched became unbearable. A pressure pressing from the closet, patient, eternal, aware of my every motion. Sometimes I swore I saw a shadow flick just as I turned my back, retreating into the folds of the hanging clothes. I tried talking aloud, asking who was there, demanding it leave, but silence answered, followed by the faintest creak of movement. Even my dreams carried it, a figure emerging slowly from shadows, smiling faintly, watching, waiting, patient, deliberate. I stopped leaving my bedroom door open, stopped inviting anyone inside, fearing the discovery of something that shouldn't exist. The closet seemed to breathe, walls pressing subtly, air thickening, creating the impression of presence without form, yet undeniably there. I began sleeping with a knife under my pillow, flashlight in hand, yet the pressure never left the edges of perception. Objects I left near the closet, shoes, books, hangers, were subtly rearranged each morning, mocking my attempts at control. The floorboards creaked differently, a rhythm forming like footsteps pacing, yet the closet remained visually empty, patient, eternal. I noticed faint scratches on the floor inside, edges of the baseboard, subtle enough to question, impossible to ignore. I tried sealing the closet completely, taping doors, blocking air, but it adapted, sounds persisting, shadows curling, patient. Even during the day, I felt its presence, lingering in the room, corners darker, air heavier, impossible to escape. I began whispering into the darkness, speaking to it, warning it, hoping for recognition or mercy, but only silence answered. The rustling grew precise again at night, deliberate, counting, testing, learning, patient. an intelligence inhabiting the empty space. Sometimes I swore I saw its outline reflected in mirrors, bending around walls, just at the edge of sight. I started avoiding the closet, hugging corners, leaving lights on, moving softly, but it adapted, curling shadows to follow me. Even in my dreams, it waits at the edge, a patient observer, a presence that exists only in awareness and anticipation. I realized it doesn't need a body to haunt, just a space, a consciousness, a patient mind, studying mine. I stopped sleeping entirely in that room at times, fearing contact, fearing discovery, fearing what it had learned. Even now, I feel it when I enter, shifting shadows, air thick, corners bending, the closet never empty, never gone. And I understand finally that the man in my closet isn't imaginary. He exists. Patient, eternal, observing every moment of my life.